Hello, my name is Adriana Bracamonte, and this is my author discussion on the Black Power movement. So to start off, what is Black Power? Black Power is what Stokely Carmichael, the leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which is I will mention later on, he defines Black Power as a way of the general idea of African Americans identifying themselves and having the right to defend and organize and protect themselves from racial violence. The Black Power movement occurred from the 1960s to the 1970s. It was a political and social movement advocating for racial equality, pride, self-sufficiency for those African American descents. Many participants were civil rights movements activists, and they promoted nonviolent acts during the civil rights movements, and they integrated with the white population, which is what the civil rights movement was about. So Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, these are both very important idols brought up during time. I mention them because they didn't have it wasn't that they had opposing views, but as I go more in depth in this PowerPoint, Malcolm X agreed with a lot of what Martin Luther King argued for and fought for. However, Martin Luther King was more focused on the civil rights movement, which meant nonviolent acts, whereas Malcolm X believed that nonviolent acts weren't as effective as they should have been. He just believed that the American society was going to be racist no matter what, and they had to do what they had to do in order to protect themselves, even if that meant violently. So the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee is what I mentioned earlier, the SNCC, which was founded in 1960 by student activists and Stokely Carmichael, that committed and took on confronting racism and segregation in the oppressive areas in the South. These are some of the acts that occurred during the civil rights movement and the SNCC. So we have the sitting in the diners and the freedom rights. So the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they started to fail to protect their own rights, and they felt that they were going nowhere, and they became very frustrated with that. So they decided to merge with the Black Panther Party. So the Black Panther movement was founded by Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton in October of 1960 in Oakland, California, and created for self-defense and tracking incidents of police violence. And many were followers of Malcolm X. So this Black Panther movement, it was not as violent, I would say, but they were more aggressive than the SNCC was. And the leader of the SNCC ended up, when he moved to the Black Panther movement, he became, I believe it was a president for a moment, but because Bobby Seale and him clashed, that's when they decided to part their own ways. So the Black Panther movement instilled a sense of racial pride, self-esteem in the African Americans, and it was up to them to prove their lives, as I was stating earlier. They encouraged all Black to join all political parties, to provide a formidable power and foundation, which they believe would make their movement a lot more stronger and powerful. So also with the Black Panther movement, they opened carry gun laws to protect themselves. The local Black committees or communities from law enforcement, they tracked police brutality, following police cars around neighborhoods and such. They didn't stop it completely, but because of the fact that so many innocent Black African Americans were being taken advantage of or hurt, they track the police brutality to see what they can do. Although the unity and the pride made the Black Panther movement so unique, a lot of concerns came up with it. So many saw it as problematic and dangerous. They thought that the civil rights movement was so powerful with the integrating between the Black population and the white population that they felt that the Black Panther movement was sort of taking away from that and taking away all the work that the civil rights movement created. So on I'm so sorry. On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated. And this assassination brought a lot of violent acts later on. So following the assassination of Malcolm X, as I stated, many violent acts occurred, and they held rallies, armed marchers. Also, Huey P. Newton, which is a co-founder of the Black Panther movement, was arrested for murdering a police officer. And they also created a movement to free Huey P. Newton. Also, a year later, in 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. I remember this. I wasn't around during this time, but I remember learning this in school and the major stressors that it put on everybody and how significant it was. And this assassination of Martin Luther King created a lot of violent acts as well, just as Malcolm X did. The acts increased significantly. It created riots, shootouts with police, also shootouts with another Black nationalist organization, and engaged in a lot of firefights at the alley gas stations. It was starting to become a point where people became very concerned with this, like everything became a lot more violent than it should have been. Later, former Black Panther members founded a Black Liberation Army to continue the violent revolution. The Black Panther Liberation Army acts believed to have, as I stated earlier, they tried to continue the violent revolution, and in doing so, they planted a bomb in a church in San Francisco where people mourned the funeral of the San Francisco police officer Harold Hamilton, who had been killed responding to the bank robbery. Below is a picture of the police officers carrying his casket despite the bombing. Luckily, nobody was hurt or nobody was seriously injured, and they continued the procession of this funeral. This is Joseph Piagentini. He was also murdered with the BLA. So this is also Waverly Jones, who was also murdered by the BLA. This is John Victor Young, who was also murdered by the BLA. And this is James R. Green. Unfortunately, I could not find a picture of him, but he was also murdered by the BLA. This is Huey P. Newton in the year of 1989. On August 22nd, the co-founder of the Black Panther movement, Huey P. Newton, who was also arrested for murdering a police officer, was fatally shot outside by another Black guerrilla family member. I show you all these violent acts, and I'm not trying to make it seem like such a downer, but seeing these acts, you question, did the Black Power movement have any achievement with everything that they did? And the answer is yes. They wanted many things for themselves. They wanted respect. They wanted opportunities. They wanted to be treated fairly, just like everybody else. And this Black Power movement encouraged that. So the Black Power achievements, one of the achievements was that African Americans had the right to understand their own identity, which was the goal that they were going for all along, which I stated in the beginning. Also, another achievement was that they emphasized on social needs. So they had services to the underprivileged, testing for disease, giving opportunities for contraception, free food, medical care, and by 1974, there were 20 free clinics. Also, they did not terminate police brutality. They didn't stop it completely. However, they did create an intimidation for it to the point where it prevented aggressive acts. So the campaign educated Black citizens on their legal rights. Although the Black Panthers didn't end brutality, it helped prevent it for a period and gave them the education of their own rights. Also, they wanted a better education system. They wanted the free liberal schools and educations and setting up schools to teach their young people, and they did so successfully because now we have schools that teach the young people their history and standing up for their rights and their morals. Programs were later funded by Black celebrities such as Jimi Hendrix, and these programs are now established in college and universities in today's age and gives us that background information that happened in the past. Lastly, the Black Power movement had a huge impact on the American culture and society. These high-profile campaigns, they portrayed for many protesters the strength and the voice around the world that gives them that hope. Such as the Hispanics, Native Americans, women, any other type of protesters. These acts, as strong and powerful as they were, they gave them the hope and that influence. So the Black Power movement and the Black Lives Matter. The Black Power movement, I wouldn't say it's necessarily over. Yes, acts were violent back then, but they did believe in something and they did want something. And I see this today in the Black Lives Matters movement. We see the same thing with police brutality and people wanting to fight for equal rights. And this is influenced by the Black Power movement. This was such a powerful movement during that day and age that it's not just something that's just going to go away, and it's obviously influenced something into today very important day and age. And this was just an amazing thing to learn about, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to.